Hi, I'm Roz Elder. I am the president of the board of the Friends of the Library. And that's the people that sponsor this program on which you're sitting in now. A book sandwiched in is going to stay right where it is for right now through this season. And then we're going to make some interesting changes starting in February. We're moving out to Martin East Regional Library that has an absolutely awesome auditorium. It's new. They've just completely redone it. It's really nice. And here's the really nice thing. The parking is easy. You pull into the parking lot, you get out of your car and walk in the library. So we're kind of excited. I think it went on. We're kind of excited about that move. But today it is my pleasure to introduce, well, Chuck Tomlins, who's going to be giving the book review. But before that, his wife is going to come up and tell you all about him. So I welcome both of you to the Book Sandwich Den. Oh.
Well, good afternoon. Is the mic on?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Well, I'm here to introduce my husband. This is a surprise introduction. I hadn't planned on it, nor had he, and he's quite amused. He is a former professor of fine arts at the University of Tulsa. He spent 55 years there. He was one of the longest lived professors at the university. He really knew his way around. Students loved him. But we've been married. We're going to celebrate our 49th anniversary. But I will tell you about a journey that we had to Germany before the children, many, many years ago. And we went to the Bavarian area of Germany. And Chuck and I were walking up and down the hills. And he said, Annie, someday I just want to retire here and chop wood. He loved Germany so much. So I talked him into taking German lessons recently, and the German American Society asked him to become their president. And so he is now the president of the Fine Arts Division of the German American Society of Tulsa. And with that, so he has all the time in the world to give a spiel of the wonderful book he read. Here is Mr. Professor Chuck Tomlins.
Well, at least she didn't get to where all the bodies were buried, so that's she could have. Thank you. This is a real pleasure to be here. And it's the first time I've ever done this. Not the first time I've stood before a microphone, but it's definitely the first time that I've been involved with this this kind of operation. Okay. First of all, I need to know how many people read the book. Okay. Now, for those of you who didn't read the book, I don't want to be a spoiler. So we'll keep some of our comments. We won't talk about the end. Even though it's interesting. Okay. The what you see to the left, yeah, of Eoin Dempsey is this. This is the cover of the book. It's not a long book. It's a good read. He's an excellent writer. Hemingway, no. But he uses some of Hemingway's mannerisms, or really what we would call structure, in order to get the reader involved. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But let's talk for a little bit about this 47-year-old Irishman who is writing about 1943 in Nazi Germany. Incidentally, he now lives in Philadelphia, which is where our middle son lives. And I'm going to tell Joe about him and let him look him up. My son is at the Veterans Administration and he's a psychologist. So working for the VA. Eoin Dempsey, and I realize it's spelled E-O-I-N, and that's just Irish for you. But he was born in Dublin, 1977, and he tried to play rugby. He wanted to be on the rugby team for Ireland and failed miserably. So he just probably wasn't big enough, aggressive enough, or what have you. But he just said it was due to the lack of talent. So he abandoned that and accepted into the University College of Dublin to study commenced in 1995. And he wasn't exactly the most excellent student. So he's traveling around a lot. He knows how to bend his elbow, etc. But in his travels, he came to the United States, where he found his wife in 1997. Took a while because they didn't get married until 2007. She was rather resistant to the whole notion. But he did convince her. They have 3 sons that he describes as 3 beautiful sons: Robbie, Sam, and Jack. Sounds little American names, you know. They like to play golf, so he kind of likes that, but he's not a good golfer either. But I will say that if you will look him up, you will find that you can contact him. He is a very social person, and you can contact him by email or go on his website, and he'll get back to you. He, I will say this: he, on his first book, which is not this one, in his first book, he had 150 rejections. Didn't stop him. He just continued on, and he is one of the top, if not the top, Amazon bookseller on the internet. So there's a lesson there. We can talk about that later. But let's get to, let's see. I don't have a clicker here. So how am I going to do this? No.
Except it went to sleep.
So this
You have to do,
this key.
yes, except it's asleep. It times out.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. We're going to go to Germany. Is everybody aware geographically where the Black Forest is and the significance of the Black Forest, the Schwarzwald? Well, as you can see, and it's very well marked there, Black Forest. And sure enough, Freiburg is about 10 miles from Switzerland. See, I got it right. I kept calling Switzerland Sweden. That'd kill me, but that's and the Black Forest has a great history. I can see why Owen picked it to have this story unfold. You remember the Brothers Grimm, Grimm's fairy tales? Guess where it came from? Yeah. And if you walked into those woods and came out alive, you would see exactly why and how they were stimulated to collect fairy tales. They were collectors. They didn't write them. They were collectors. And these fairy tales came out of the folklore that's involved with all these villages, tiny villages that are scattered throughout the Black Forest. They're wonderful stories. We know them. Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White. Yeah, it goes on and on. All of those were Germanic. And they compiled them into some fabulous volumes. And of course, they even had to make a TV program about the Grimm, right? Yeah. Okay. But that was, which had little to nothing to do with the stories. You'll notice that the Black Forest is bordered to France, the Frankish. And the Rhine River is a separator. And then, of course, they're about 10 miles from Switzerland. And really, Bavaria, in and of itself, is more to the east and a little bit south. And you'll see there, the closest city that you will probably recognize is Stuttgart. And I don't know if this is even showing up, but Stuttgart's right there. But the areas that that Annie was talking about earlier, where I wanted to chop wood, that was actually down in the area of the Zugspitze of the Garmisch-Partenkirchen. Beautiful, beautiful area, very laid back. Unfortunately, at my age now, I don't think I'll be chopping any wood. So, and obviously, I'm not in Germany. So let's move to the. Yeah, there's a nice view of the Black Forest. These mountains are not high by our standards. The highest mountain in that area is 4,000 some odd feet. They do get snow. They get lots of. And in our book, The White Rose Black Forest, it takes place in the snow. It's in the dead of winter, 1943, as those of you who have read it know. But it is very bucolic, and you can see why I'd want to be there. And if you have any kind of draw to the out of doors and to nature, this is the place to be. Boy, it's just, maybe we will go back. Okay, I know that. She's telling me time. Okay. Now, there's a shot of the Black Forest. You can see what you would feel like walking through it or walking into it. And it gets, but before we get there, let's talk a little bit about some of the characters that are involved in this book. It is a book that is told, the story is told by Franca Gerber. Yeah, it's like the Gerber baby thing. But why he chose that, I don't know. But we have John Lynch, who is actually from Philadelphia. Actually, well, in the book, he's from Philadelphia. And he's going by as a Luftwaffe captain, Werner Graf. He speaks German eloquently, to the point in which she thinks that she can catch a bit of an accent that is not, she doesn't know where it's from. So he must have been very well trained. And if you read the book, you'll see how. But as we know, she finds him in a snowdrift. He's near death. She's thinking about committing suicide. And from there, the story gets interesting. So, but we will, other people that are involved, of course, is Daniel Berkel. That's Dirty Dan. He's the Gestapo guy. Not nice. Was a boyfriend of Sophie Scholl. No, the boyfriend of, I'm sorry, of Franca, because these people didn't exist before. Now, there's two people that are involved in the book that actually existed. Hans and Sophie Scholl. They were the instigators and the ramrod and the energy that was behind White Rose. What is White Rose? White Rose was a resistance organization out of Munich, Germany. Of course, it was students. Sophie was only 22. Hans was 24. In the story, Franca is having a relationship with Hans, or did have a relationship with Hans, as well as with Daniel. That's just, I mean, it's historical fiction, so we have to roll with it. But Hans and Sophie Scholl existed. And they were, at the ripe old age of 22 and 24, put to death in the most heinous of manners, the guillotine. One of the guards at the one of the prisons there spoke about Sophie as being quite amazing, that she went to her death with no emotion. And later, if I have time, because I'm going to waste a lot of time, it looks like, there are quotes by Sophie that are very well worth listening to. And what I would say is that you should get the book, read it, and you'll find those quotes, because they're quite amazing. And they're actual quotes from her. During this period of time, of course, Hitler, 1943, we're right in the middle of Nazi Germany. And it was interesting that there were three things that Nazi Germany demanded of their women. They obviously did not hold women in high esteem. They had their own KKK, not to be confused with our KKK over here, even though there's not much difference. But the K's in this case were Kinder, children, Kirche, church, and Küche, kitchen. That's what you're supposed to, barefoot and pregnant, by golly. Make more Aryan lads so that we will have them for the wife. That's what they wanted. They weren't pussyfooting around. That's the way they did. That's the way it was. And people, curiously enough, fell right into place. It's horrible, actually, when you think about it. And we don't like to think about it because it was not a great time for the world. It just was not a good time. But this book, taking place at that time with an undercover agent, John Lynch, who was posing, of course, as a captain for the Luftwaffe, the Air Force. Those things went on. Some of them were successful. Many of them were not. But within the book, it was interesting to note that Franca's relationship with Hans landed her in a lot of hot water. The Gestapo, they discovered that she was part of the White Rose, and she was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Now, this is interesting. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but Hans and Sophie, were executed. And actually, if there had been a Franca and she had been caught with the White Rose, she'd be dead too. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the author chooses to have Franca go through this period of time and because earlier she was involved with the female part of the Jugendreich, the Hitler group, and it was just it's an interesting transition. Now, supposedly she's 17 years old when she is in the Nazi group, and she is 26 years old when she is let out of prison, and she has a nursing degree, and she goes on to then have this relationship with John Lynch. But she was definitely convicted as an enemy of the state. Daniel, those of you who have read the book, probably learned to hate him. And we won't talk about what happens to him, but it's kind of a John Wayne thing. I don't know the time. I'm going to read you a statement by Sophie. Remember, she's the real one. Franca is fictitious. She states, our current state is the dictatorship of evil. We know that already. I hear you object, and we don't need you to reproach us for it yet again. But I ask you, if you know that, then why don't you act? Why do you tolerate these rulers gradually robbing you in public and in private of one right after another until one day nothing, absolutely nothing remains but the machinery of the state under the command of criminals and drunkards? Direct quote from her. Obviously not in English, she did it in German. I mentioned that because history has a tendency we need to pay attention to history. And definitely to Sophie and Hans. There were, for both of them, let's bring them up. Hans is on the left and Sophie's on the right. Possibly the picture that is on the front of the book could be Sophie, but I'm not convinced. I don't know if it is. I just find it a complete shame and waste of intellect and of human resource that these two people, along with many, many others, were put to death for their beliefs, because it did not fit what the regime or the Reich at that time was perpetrating. And what they were perpetrating was simple annihilation of people who don't believe the way they do. And if you don't, it's either my way or the highway. We've heard that statement, but in this case, the highway led you to the guillotine. Not good. I do want to say something about the way that Owen writes the book. In the beginning, you've got snowfall. You're in the Black Forest. Black Forest is a magical place. You feel that magic. You feel with the snow, and the snow's falling. And of course, Franca is in a cabin that belongs to her family. Family is a big thing in this book. Which again was a tragedy in reference to Nazi Germany, because families went against each other. They turned each other in, and people went away, never to be seen again. Because why? They thought it was the right thing to do. But in that beginning, it is soft. The words move slowly. The sentences are a little bit longer. They're like snowdrifts. Then after John and Franco come together, and there's this whole tete-a-tete that's going on as she's trying to figure out, is he for real or not? Is he really a Luftwaffe? Or is he, because she had heard something, he had cried out in the night in English. Now, why is this important? It's important to the way, when you read something, just like in Hemingway, Hemingway had a knack for moving you rhythmically through the words, through the sentences, through the paragraphs, unlike E.E. Cummings, which you never knew what a punctuation was, even though I love him. But and then it gets interesting, because obviously there's going to have to be an escape, because why? John is there to get hold of an individual, a scientist, who obviously is involved with what? The atom bomb. You know, this is big stuff. And he has to convince Franca that this is a good thing, because eventually, of course, they're going to, they figure it out. Well, let's not forget about Daniel, because Daniel is going to show up again. But towards the end of the book, you're going to be tired. Yeah. It is rapid fire. He gets hold of you by the neck and won't let go, and carries you right to the end. And yeah, it's a fairy tale, and it's okay. I love it. Yeah, it's a romance story. It's a story about family. It's a story about a horrible time in our history. But I didn't have any idea what I was getting into when I had to read, or got to read, White Rose, Black Forest. Thank you for inviting me to do that. I just spilled my coffee. Without giving away the book in toto, I'm going to stop. Yeah. And we have questions. I'll try to find answers. And those of you who have read the book, don't forget you can chime in too. Yeah.
I was shocked thinking, comparing Sophie with having been born at about the same time as my mother.
Ah.
And here is 100 years ago, and her strength and the children having been raised by intellectuals, they know how to analyze things, not take up, and stand up for what they believe in. And my mother was the same way. But how quickly they were literally taken down. Guillotine. I mean, their heads chopped off within hours. And it's eerily reminiscent of a regime that we're introduced. And we have people going lockstep in the future, just as the Hitler Youth did back then. Here and there. What will be the future of the journalists, the people who dare to speak out?
That's a good question, and I wish I had an answer. Excuse me? Oh. Okay, she was noting that the tenacity of, like, Hans and Sophie during this period of time, which is an exact period of time which her mother was born. And that to allow this to happen, but there were people who resisted against it. And she made a comparison to what possibly is going on now. I don't want to get into politics. But nonetheless, I can only say, let's be vigilant. And also, don't forget to vote and become involved. Yes. Not to my knowledge. No. They were students and they were obviously intellectuals, and they saw that this was going sideways and they didn't want to be a part of it. And what they did, the White Rose, most of it just happened in Munich. Some of these things were printed by hand. The distribution went to professors and to a few people that they knew, and eventually they got it bigger. And they were actually expanding into other colleges when the war finally came to an end. But yeah, it was. But for those who got caught, they got caught actually distributing. They had it in their hands. Kind of like getting caught tagging, but I don't put it in the same category. They had a belief, and it was a belief that was good, really, for all people. It was equal. And when they could see someone trying to take away what they had, destroying their privacy, destroying their families, no, they were not happy. But they got their head chopped off for it. Yeah. Yes, it did. And there is a statement in reference to that. Reminded me of Fahrenheit 451. I mean, we constantly come back to these things and we look at them, but sometimes we just look at them intellectually or formally, and we don't embrace them to really find out how you really feel about it. Or is this happening around you? Are they banning books? I don't think they started burning them yet, but they're sure as heck banning them. I don't know. This book might get banned. It makes suggestions that you don't want to hear. Yes, ma'am.
One of the quotes, I can't quote it exactly, but it goes something like this in the book. When they burn books, they'll read that next they'll burn people.
Yes. Matter of fact, I may have that. Here I do. Where they burn books, they will also, in the end, burn people. That's the quote. And my note is, of course, Fahrenheit 451. Any other questions? Yes. Oh.
Talked about the trust development between those two. It kind of went back both ways.
Yeah, I did.
As far as each of them had a different background that kind of at odds to where they had to know a little bit more before they could get very far. But you didn't mention too much about another relationship that kind of slowed the story down early on as far as his condition.
Yes. I thought that was, you got to read the book. Okay, no, we will say both of his legs were broken. He parachuted out at a very low altitude, and he broke both legs. And I know how horrible that can be, because I have a friend who was in the airborne in Vietnam, and somebody landed on his canopy, and he Roman candled in and jammed his back from his tailbone to his top of his neck. He's suffering to this day. He's still alive, but he's suffering. His was fixable, and it's interesting how she went about fixing it. And those of you who've read the book, you probably wonder how she got away with it. I did, especially given the way that the people were reacting and acting, and they were suspicious. She was good though. When she sat down with Daniel and had a little cup of coffee or what have you, and he, of course, liked to just drill in Danielle. He was a bad man. He obviously was weak. He got his strength from position, not because he had the smarts for it, but he was just evil. He really embodies evilness. And when you read the book, you're going to learn to hate him. Maybe not hate. Hate, that's a strong word. You're going to dislike him greatly. But it's interesting what happens later. But you also have to realize that Franca, with her family, she's lost her mother, cancer. The father was killed in an Allied bomb raid. This cabin that she is in, deep in the woods of the Black Forest, is a summer home for that family. So they were pretty well off, I think. It's not a big cabin, one bedroom, but nonetheless, it's in the infamous Black Woods. Yes, ma'am. No, you had a question.
The quote that you read from Sophie that you said was real.
Yes.
And you asked him why. Who was she speaking to? You know, who was she asking why?
Fellow students.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they were always recruiting.
So they were mostly on college campus.
Yes. Yeah, and the University of Munich is pretty big. And Munich is huge. So, yeah. But nonetheless, the walls have ears.
Well, because I've always wondered why. Why not?
I know.
Who are I?
Well, we can ask that question again and again and again. Look around the world and you say, why? Why is that going on? Where's the logic in that? Where's the love in that? Where's the humanity in that? And it makes me cringe. But nonetheless, thanks for turning me on to this book.
And the Schultz were young people.
Yes.
Decided not to go along with the flow, which would have been the easier thing to do. They followed their conscience. And it's because of people like that that did resist Hitler that made the tide turn. And there's that, who was it that said, what did you do? Or what will you do? And what did you do? And so even though they were beheaded, their heads chopped off, they are beloved in the movie. And I was comforted to see that there is a whole plaza of commemoration with bronzes of leaf prints in bronze and across the plaza.
including postage stamps.
Yes, and so obviously Germany has changed.
Yes, oh yeah, definitely. I put no disparaging, no shade on Germany at this point. I love Germany. Obviously I love Germans, so that, and she hails from Austria, Österreich.
I was just going to make, I don't know if you can hear me, and you, I don't know.
You want to come up here?
No, no, but there was an article, an opinion in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, written by Joel Gray.
Yeah.
Remember Joel Gray, he was the star of Cabaret? There's a new Cabaret out, but this article was about his experience, and very short, but very interesting, because he said in the play, when he welcomed people into the cabaret, he said this was a safe place from what was going on outside. But in the end, the Nazis broke through. And his comment at the very end of his opinion piece was, the world is out there, and we don't know, but any moment it can shatter our lives. I think that's what you're alluding to,
Yeah.
piece of people, you know.
You have to be vigilant.
Yeah.
It's okay just to, I don't know, pull back in and not worry about it. Somebody else will worry about that. No, they won't. And I'm not political. I'm furthest thing from it. I'm one of those screaming independents that just votes for the person.
Well, the twist in this, turning to, the ad fall,
Yes,
that kind of caught me by surprise, because I knew there was something scientifically secret that, the scientists was dealing with. But, a classmate of mine, she worked tirelessly for years and we put it onto a bridge. And now we see it potentially, raising its ugly head again.
Yes.
If not us, someone else. We need to be part of it.
yeah, too many people have the bomb.
You know, our world could be shattered. So, anyway, this is a book on so many levels that deals with something.
I think so. I know so since I've read it, and it just I really enjoyed the book.
Oh, you finished, huh?
No, I'm,
This is wonderful. With a dark feeling, but I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next week.
thank you.